Hey you guys, Tomes of Terror time once again. So, in case you hadn't noticed, it's getting to be about that time of year. Yes, it's the holiday season. So I figured I should maybe try and get into the Christmas spirit a little bit by reading some Christmas themed horror, because I hadn't really done any Christmas themed horror this year, either books or movies. So, quite at random, I'm scrolling through my Kindle and I come across a kind of spooky sounding novel from 2023, which is called Alice, A Christmas Ghost Story, by a British author who's quite prolific. Her name is Shani Struthers, or Shani. I'm not really sure how you pronounce that, so forgive me. So this was pretty much it, and it kind of like the cover of it and stuff like that looked like exactly what I was looking for. I like kind of old school Christmas ghost stories. But I'll read like newer ones like that. But this one seemed like it was going to be kind of like a more old school, spooky kind of ghost story. And much like kind of most of your classic holiday ghost stories from the old days, this one is actually told as a frame story. But unlike classic ghost stories, this one doesn't exactly have a ghost in the strictest sense of the word. I might not even call it horror. It's almost more like a supernatural mystery. But, that said, this is definitely a very, very eerie, very Christmas heavy, and also like surprisingly affecting story of kind of tragedy overcome by compassion, I guess. And honestly, seriously, if you don't like tear up just a little bit, like at the end of this, then I think you might be emotionally dead inside. So our main protagonist is a 19-year-old woman named Lottie. Now, at the beginning of the story, which is set on Christmas Eve of 2023, she's trying to get from Sunderland to London. The problem is there's this horrible snowstorm blowing in, and there's no trains, no buses. Everything's been canceled because the weather's getting really bad. So Lottie is, all we know at first is that she is desperate to get to London to this person named Alice, and she's trying everything she can think of, but nobody is really willing to risk traveling that far in the worsening weather. So she's finally kind of at the end of her rope. She's calling like taxi services and all this other kind of stuff. And finally, she gets to this business called Tony's Taxis. And the owner of the place, after he sees hears rather how distraught she is, he's like, tell you what, I'll take you. Like, I know the weather's getting bad, but we'll make it. It'll be good. I know you have to get somewhere. So while they're in the car, like during this very long, harrowing drive, like where this storm is basically like following them, Lottie tells Tony why she needs to get to London to see Alice so badly. And then the tale, like I said, kind of jumps back a year. So like I said, that's kind of like the frame story. And periodically they update like her in the present with Tony in the car. But mostly it's kind of like a flashback. So Lottie explains that back in 2022, she was at a pretty bad place in her life. Her best and pretty much only friend in the world, who was this young guy named Matt, had recently died of leukemia. And she wasn't really sure how she was going to kind of go on without him. Also messing with her head is the fact that she's kind of psychic. Like, more specifically, she's like an empath. She can read people's thoughts, like when she touches them. Although it generally only works really well if they're kind of close to death. You know what I mean? So before Matt died, she was hugging him and she felt his thoughts. And they were all about how it wasn't fair that Lottie got to live while he had to die, and how he kind of wished that she had been the one to get cancer instead. Like, it was pretty fucked up, like the stuff that he was thinking. So understandably, like, Lottie feels horrible about this. This was her best friend, and she had no idea that he thought these kind of things. And she also feels guilty because, she survived, obviously, but is also, again, understandably shocked at the depth of the anger and hatred and blame that he harbored toward her, and is also kind of fearful that he might have taken all of those negative emotions with him into the afterlife. So Lottie kind of fell into a very deep depression. She dropped out of school. And she really doesn't have any plans for the future. Sometimes she wouldn't get out of bed, like for days at a time. Now, her mom, whose name is Jenny, like my name, she lives with her mom. And, the mom's been understanding up to a point. Her best friend just died, for Christ's sake. But after a while, she finally gives Lottie an ultimatum. She's like, look, either get out of the house and get a job and contribute to the rent, or get the hell out of here. Now, Jenny actually has a friend named Patsy, who owns a care home, or I guess you call it like an old folks home or assisted living facility or something like that. It's not really assisted living because it's pretty much a nursing home. So yeah, it's called Silver Birches. And she arranges for Lottie to work there. Now, at first, Lottie cannot stand the place, and she's kind of planning to just work there for a couple months before quitting, just to like appease her mom, right? It's like, look, I tried and I couldn't do it. For one thing, one of the things that's making it kind of shitty is that Patsy is kind of an asshole. She's sort of she's in her 40s, but she's like super tarted up, you know what I mean? She always wears super short skirts and big pumps and everything. I mean, she works at a nursing home, you know what I mean? And she always has like all this makeup and her hair done and long nails and everything like that. And she kind of cuts corners on the care of the patients, like in her charge, but she also spends loads of money on fancy clothes and fancy cars for herself. And she also pays for these really lavish dates with a series of like much younger men who never seem to stick around for all that long. She's also kind of a drunk. And there's not only all of that, but the other employees at the care home really aren't all that compassionate about, the people that they're caring for. They treat them with, they don't abuse them or anything like that, but they're kind of careless. It's just very efficient. They don't really show them any, emotion or try to hang out with them or be nice to them or anything like that. And when they start causing too much trouble, they just straight up like, hey, just sedate them, you know what I mean? And stick them in their room. They're just being disruptive. Now, initially, Lottie is kind of ambivalent about the residents of the care home. I mean, a lot of them are quite elderly and they just kind of stare off into space most of the time. So, they're not really that exciting to hang around. But as she works there longer, she actually starts to become more interested in them as people and decides that she wants to show them the compassion that Patsy and the other workers won't or can't. So one of the main things that has contributed to Lottie's change of attitude is she starts developing a friendship with one of the residents, who's this very feisty, kind of saucy old lady named Bobby. And Bobby, she has absolutely no qualms about telling Patsy, the owner of the place, to just, shove it up her ass or whatever. And she also doesn't really like to hang out with all the other old people, like in the care home, even though she's older than most of them. But she doesn't have like an old people attitude, and she kind of like doesn't want to hang out with them, you know what I mean? So Lottie and Bobby actually end up becoming really close. Like Lottie has this blue hair and Bobby really likes it, so Lottie comes in and like dyes her hair pink because she never got to when she was younger, like dye her hair crazy colors and all this other stuff. So they kind of spend a lot of time like while Lottie's working, like talking about their lives. Lottie even tells Bobby about her psychic gift, which nobody but her mom knows about, and her mom's kind of shitty about it a little bit, like, hey, don't do that or don't talk about it or whatever. It turns out that Bobby also has a little bit of the same ability, but it's not as pronounced as Lottie's is. Now, the thing that fascinates both women the most, and the thing that comprises kind of like the largest aspect of the plot of the book, is the story behind this very mysterious patient in the care home whose name is Alice, and she lives in the room across the hall from Bobby's. Now, Alice has been in the home for a while, and as far as anyone knows, she was transferred from another facility. She's 92 years old and is pretty much catatonic. Like, she just kind of sits in a chair staring out the window all day, every day, and then like a couple employees come and move her back from the bed and then back to the chair and stuff like that. And she just kind of sits there and stares all day long. Now, the only exception to this rule is Christmas Eve, when the woman suddenly becomes very animated and starts fighting back against the care workers and screaming one word over and over, and that word is wish. So before Lottie even goes in the room or meets her, like as soon as she opens the door, she feels and senses this like really crushing sadness like around Alice. And she starts to become curious enough about her past to kind of go in there and like touch her hand and like see what she can see. Now, the visions that she gets from this aren't real clear, but they're pretty terrifying. Like, it's this just completely black room. There's a whole bunch of, seemingly uncaring, like, medical personnel, like, standing over her. And there's just this overwhelming sense of, like, panic and terror. Like, it's really, really scary. So as time goes on, Lottie, she just becomes bound and determined to discover what happened to Alice that left her in this state. And also, at the same time, is starting to learn to live with her abilities, which have kind of, up to this point, been sort of like a blessing and a curse, but mostly the latter. So this book was actually quite beautiful. It's very sad, and it's it does have like some really creepy, like disquieting aspects to it, especially like in light of like the visions and things like that she gets from Alice. It also gave me really wonderful like wintry vibes, you know what I mean? Like it was very, very Christmas heavy because like I said, they're driving through this snowstorm and everything's set around Christmas time. So it really does lean hard into that. And I think like the whole thing builds up to this real emotional crescendo at the end that was really like kind of heartbreaking, but also kind of uplifting at the same time. So as I mentioned, this is not a traditional ghost story in the strictest sense. The ghosts here mostly appear as Lottie's psychic visions mainly. Like you're led to believe that they are real ghosts, like it is people contacting her, you know what I mean? She's not just seeing things, but it's not like, so don't go in like expecting just these gossamer apparitions like floating down the hall or anything like that. This is a lot more like a much more prosaic, like an internal type of ghost story. Because like I said, she's just seeing visions and like ghosts that are, you know, communicating with her. But I have to say, I loved every minute of this. I read it straight through in one sitting. I was so immersed in the whole mystery of Alice's past, like what the hell happened to this lady. And I just couldn't stop like turning the pages. And Lottie herself is such an appealing main character. She's just this kind of, you know, little punk rock little lady. And she just has this really like such a deep capacity for empathy. But because of her past, she's sort of like reluctant to take on the burdens of other people's pain. But as the story goes on, she kind of learns to live with that and manage it. I also loved that this story incorporated one of my very favorite urban legends. And this, I think, is like a slightly more obscure urban legend that I first read about when I was a little kid, like in a book that I had. I won't say which urban legend it is because that would kind of be too much of a spoiler, but I really, really liked the way the details of it were woven into the story. So, I mean, if you're in the mood for like a paranormal Christmas read that's kind of tinged with melancholy, like I said, it's kind of very sad, then definitely check this one out. It gave me like a lot of feels, not gonna lie. And, you know, sort of the whole vibe of it just made me long for a very overcast, snowy Christmas day, like in front of a Christmas, you know, a big roaring fire or whatever. And, you know, with some hot chocolate or whatever. It's like, you know, too bad I live in Florida and I never ever get that. But, you know, I can just imagine it like while I'm reading stuff like this. That's about all I can hope for. So that will do it for this Tomes of Terror. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys again on the next one. Merry Christmas.